Stay up to date on the latest political news this election season for less. Visit inforum.news/port and get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Subscribe now at inforum.news/port. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk. And as part of our series of candidate debates, today we bring you the North Dakota Attorney General race. Now, the Attorney General's office has been in the news a lot lately, beginning with the tragic passing of longtime Attorney General Wayne Stenehjem, who had already announced that he wasn't running this year. That led to the appointment of the Republican candidate to replace him, Drew Wrigley, being appointed to finish out that term in office. And obviously Drew is now running for his own term in that office, endorsed by the North Dakota Democratic-NPL to run in this race as well is Tim Lamb, who is an attorney from the city of Grand Forks. Both gentlemen are on with us, as well as my Wednesday co-host, Chad Oban. And we're going to have a conversation about the issues facing the Attorney General race. And first of all, let's start with the incumbent, Drew Wrigley. Drew, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to be the Attorney General of North Dakota? You are the acting Attorney General now, having been appointed to that position by Governor Burgum, but obviously you were campaigning for it before that. Why did you want to be Attorney General for our state?
Well, first, thanks, Rob, and others. I appreciate all of us getting on here today, and Chad, good to see you. Tim, good to see you again. It's been a little while since we've had an opportunity to chat too, so I value this opportunity. Thank you to Chad and Rob for setting this up, and for Tim, us all being on here. It was about a year ago that I started, maybe a little more than that actually, that I actually went to Wayne's office one day and let him know that in the event that he didn't run for another term, that I was giving serious consideration to that. And the reason, it dovetails in the easy answer. I suppose people would say, well, you were U.S. attorney, and I was privileged to serve as United States attorney here in North Dakota twice for a total of 10 years. But also I served, I'm a fourth generation North Dakotan, but I did leave the state for a few years, both for law school and then to serve in one of the nation's largest district attorney's offices in one of the nation's most violent cities, Philadelphia. And that experience, I have a real passion for law and order, law enforcement, and that isn't about some need or desire to put people in jail. It's about safe communities and enforcing the rule of law. And it's a real passion of mine. And the Attorney General's office, the number of people that have said to me, well, you're kind of back in your wheelhouse. You're doing the same work you did as U.S. attorney. Well, there are echoes, there are similarities, but this is a much broader set of responsibilities that touch on really every aspect of government life here in North Dakota, and the ability to utilize my now decades of experience in enforcement and compliance, whatever you want to call it. We deal in gaming issues and gaming enforcement. We've had a number of investigations that we've launched really in an unprecedented push for enforcement under the Secretary of State's responsibilities for voter integrity, ballot integrity, petitioning integrity in the state. These are essentially critical matters. I just finished testifying this morning in front of a joint committee on the Judiciary Committee up at the Capitol, talking about rule of law issues there as well. I feel very strongly about our public speaks to our laws through our elected representatives, and those laws have got to be carried out in a thoughtful, objective, fair, judicious manner. And that's been the work of my life. I've been privileged to work in and out of law enforcement, and then also my time serving in the executive branch as the Lieutenant Governor of North Dakota. Bring those experiences together really created for me. I had a situation thinking about what to do next with my career, and we all have what we consider to be gifts and skills and things that we've worked on. And I felt that the fit would be strong here. We could provide public service and do meaningful work that impacts the communities across the state. And I'll tell you, I've not been disappointed in the 8 months that I got here about the wide array of opportunities to really serve the public and do our part to help ensure that our gaming laws are enforced in an even-handed, fair manner, that our Secretary of State has the support that they need in civil litigation matters on behalf of the various interests in the environment, the energy sector, the agriculture sector, criminal law. I have a very keen interest in the criminal laws of North Dakota. My predecessor and I were good friends across 2 decades, but in my 10 years as United States Attorney, then Attorney General Stenehjem and I didn't interact a whole lot on those matters. It was my background and something I'd worked in, and we utilized the BCI, of course, as we do now. But because of my background and both in and out of the U.S. Attorney's Office, I'm interacting quite extensively with the United States Attorney's Office because they utilize our BCI resources very, very heavily.
Yeah.
And
well, we're gonna
I bring that up to the table, and I'm proud to have that experience, and I feel very blessed really to have this opportunity to continue to serve and utilize those skills.
We're gonna get into all of that, but we also want to talk to Tim Lamb and ask Mr. Lamb, same question to you: why do you want to be Attorney General?
Yeah, thanks, Rob and Chad, and good to see you again, Drew. As you know, Rob, you were at the convention. They were looking for somebody to run against Drew. I was under the impression that there was somebody already selected, so I kind of was on the sidelines there. I got a call, and I answered the call, and so I put my name in the hat, so to speak, and it's kind of growing on me. I've always wanted to be run for a statewide position. I've run here in Grand Forks on the school board for 15 years. And that experience, coupled with my 2 decades, 20 years in the Army as an officer, retired as a major, and commanded 2 companies overseas in Germany, responsible for $250 million of defense equipment, and I had over 200 soldiers in my command. So I'm bringing that skill set to the table, and I think I can make a difference. I really think it's time that we get somebody in the Attorney General's office that is going to look at the issues in an open and honest and transparent manner. And so I'm dedicated to that philosophy. And there's been some things that happen that are really I guess in a word, suspect that's going on. I'm bringing a clean slate, and I'm going to take a look at some of the issues that have been kind of brushed underneath the carpet. And there's no AG opinion on them. It's just a declaration that, hey, there's nothing wrong with deleted emails from my longtime friend, Wayne Stenehjem, who's been in the office. He was there for over 20 years. Great guy, honorable man, but they deleted all his emails. And I'll get into a little bit of that later if I can. But also, there's some other issues without an AG opinion. A declaration that a trust owned by Bill Gates can own a ton of land up there in Walsh County. So that coupled with the issues under the Industrial Commission with oil spills across the state, and those penalties being just excused, if you will. So there's I think a lot of room for improvement, if you will, in the AG's office. And I think we need somebody, in there with a fresh set of eyes, and he's going to be who's going to look at the office more as a nonpartisan office, as it should be. Just like with a judgeship, you don't go in there and say, "Hey, I'm going to tout the party line." No, that's not the way to do business. You look at the issues, you study the facts, study the law, and apply the law to the facts. And if it's against you, so be it.
Thank you, Tim. We'll get into some of the questions here, and I think we'll get to a lot of the issues both of you brought up. The first question I want to ask is for you, Drew. Last week or maybe the week before, you announced the North Dakota crime statistics and expressed some concerns about an uptick in the numbers of a lot of the different areas. Tim, you responded by saying the approach to dealing with this was the wrong approach or an outdated approach. So, Drew, will you talk a little bit about those crime stats, what you think we should do to bring those numbers back down? And then, Tim, what's wrong with the approach that Drew's talking about? What would you do?
Appreciate that question. Thanks, Chad. I noted that in response to us putting those crime statistics out, my opponent in this race said he didn't see anything in the report that was troubling. That would be troubling to the many, many hundreds of people who are victims of violent crime in North Dakota in 2021, the year for which the report was prepared. In addition, they would be, I think, troubled, and people across the state are troubled. I know this from traveling all over North Dakota, talking to people about this issue, that an uptick of 10%, a little over 10% in violent crimes, including robberies and right on down the list, assaults, is troubling to people because they realize that when you see those percentages, something is eroding. And so what we've put together, I'll be releasing in the next couple of weeks in response to the uptick in violent crime. And everybody's aware of this if they just listen to the news every day. I grew up in Fargo as a fourth generation North Dakota, and I really feel like there were maybe 3 shootings my entire childhood before I left for the University of North Dakota. On a weekly basis in North Dakota, there's troubling crimes being committed by criminals who have armed themselves to the teeth with firearms. And it's not just a challenge for law enforcement; it's a clear and present danger to our communities. We see it every day. So with that in mind, I put together a package of proposals that I made the pledge. I'll either present that as the newly elected Attorney General, or I'll present that as a private citizen with a background in law enforcement. But we are going to. I believe we need to get to a point where we are extracting the most violent criminals from our communities and placing them in lengthy and certain prison sentences that will protect our communities from those individuals, provide a punishment for those individuals, and a disincentive for carrying firearms, which is becoming way too common among criminals in this state. I've heard from men and women all across the state in uniform, sheriff's office, police departments, and tribal law enforcement, federal law enforcement, talking about the fact that they get a gun arrest on some drug dealers out there. He pistol whips another drug dealer or something, maybe shoots somebody, armed robbery, and they get a sentence. Too often it's not long enough to begin with, but even no matter how long it is, they're coming back right back into the community rapidly to continue on their crime spree. We see in the paper all the time the recidivists. They repeat over and over and over. And we as a community can extract these individuals, place them in a prison cell. There'll be a disincentive for that conduct, but also the communities will be made more safe. This is not yet a problem that is out of control, but it could get there. And I've lived in places like that, and we're not going to tolerate that in North Dakota. So that proposal is one component of it. Also, a similar, and the proposal that we're going to be rolling out will have mandatory time consecutive to the underlying offense. So if someone commits a burglary and they're carrying a firearm illegally, they'll get an additional sentence automatically, mandatory and consecutive, so it lengthens the sentence when they're sentenced on the burglary. And then if they take the weapon out in a menacing fashion, it's additionally higher time. And if they discharge the weapon, additionally higher time. It very much echoes the federal system that we have in place across the United States. It's been very effective as an anti-violent crime system. And I want to utilize that in North Dakota. We've got wide acceptance. I've already got wide acceptance for that idea from the sheriffs and the chiefs of police. And I've met with bipartisan elected representatives all across the state. The Deputy Attorney General and I have traveled all over North Dakota to talk about the BCI and their work and how we can make them even more effective. And this issue comes up again and again and again.
I
So
want to
that's
just,
the trick.
but
Go ahead, Rob.
before we throw it over to Tim, I just want to interject just to put some stats, some numbers to what we're talking about. The crime report that came out, as Drew mentioned, it was a 10% increase in the violent crime rate, which is a category that includes murder, manslaughter, rape, and assault, rose by 10.1% from 2020 to 2021. That was about 1,400 crimes per 100,000 population to about 1,556 crimes per 100 population. It's also been a 20% increase if we go back to 2017. Tim, Chad's question to you.
Yeah, I just, Drew mentioned murders. Murders are down 15% from 30 to 15. I'm looking at this 175-page report here. I've extracted some of the information. I really haven't had the luxury to, go through everything, but I'm looking at page, for example, 44 of the report, and it says total arrests for adults from 2017 to 2021. For example, 2021 is the lowest, 24,615 arrests, the lowest in the 5-year span. And that to me doesn't indicate that we have a huge problem, as I said to the reporter the other day. I think the biggest problem is a jump in juvenile arrests, which went actually from 2020 to 2021. It went from 3,408 to 4,058, which is a jump of about 600,000 or 600, but if you compare it to the other 5 years, it's about average. So violent crimes, I think the biggest issue is with the juveniles in bullying and assault type of crimes. And I think we need to attack that, in my opinion, with some increase in mental health service. I mean, obviously the pandemic has had a huge impact on our society and has it caused, I think, a lot of people to, adverse behavior, criminal behavior, perhaps. And I think we need to study this from an expert position. I'm not aware of these law enforcement, sheriffs, and all the police departments getting together. You'd think you'd see something in the news about that. I haven't seen anything about that. I would actually, if elected Attorney General, I would turn to the local police departments and turn to the local sheriff's departments. They're all local. There's no statewide coalition, if you will, of those law enforcement agencies. They take their statistics locally, and they apply what they need to do to control crime within their territories. To usurp that at the state level, I think, is really counterproductive. We tried, for example, if you look back in the history of the state, we tried mandatory minimums about 20 years ago. What it does, it clogs up the court system. It clogs up the jail system. We already have an overabundance of criminals in jails now. What Drew is proposing is to increase those jail times so we have more prisoners. We have to build more cells, and it's just going to cost the public unreal. It's unfathomable what he's proposing. If you study criminal justice in college, which I did, there's sort of a pendulum of what we do in our society. We lock up the prisoners forever, or we try to rehab them, and it goes from one to the other. And I think we should swing back to rehab our prisoners, get them back in society. We need workers. We need employees in our society. Get these guys rehabbed, get them off the drugs, get them off alcohol, and get them more productive in our society. That's what we need to do.
Drew, to Tim's point, it kind of meshes with my question is, I think both nationally, certainly we saw, even during the Trump administration, progress on criminal justice reform. And I know that term means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think even here in North Dakota, we saw some progress, everything from, moving marijuana possession down to an infraction, making some reforms in our prisons aimed at, maybe more rehabilitation, things like that. How does your proposal fit into that larger? Because I do think there's a lot of public appetite thinking, well, if we put somebody in prison for a long time, most of the people we put in prison get out of prison again. And when they get out of prison again, are they going to join society as good citizens, or are they going to join society and not have the skills to rejoin society and become recidivists? So can you talk about what you're proposing or what you're identifying in the context of that movement?
Sure. I first want to point out, though, that there are so many fundamental flaws in understanding of the system and what Tim, and I say this with all due respect. I mean, I understand Tim's not been working in the criminal justice system as I've had the privilege of doing across decades. And to say that the fact that arrests have gone down in the face of dramatically escalating violent crime completely supports my position in this matter. Arrests have gone up. That's the clearance rate. Whether someone gets arrested or not, the crime rate for every victim is 100%. So to say that the arrests going down is somehow an indication of the problem, it's not at all. That's underscores the problem, because as the percentage of crimes that are met with an arrest goes down, you've got more criminals that are out there committing these violent offenses. So they're up almost 11%. And I agree with the reform ideas, but it has to change as we get additional information. You can't just say reform is, or you shouldn't just say reform is letting people out of jail more quickly. I mean, Tim obviously has not dealt with victims of serious violent crime. To say that this is an issue of bullying is to have never spoken with rape victims who you're getting prepared for trial, is never spoken with someone who's robbed at gunpoint, beaten to within an inch of their life, or beaten severely. I'll tell you what, this problem that we have, and it is escalating, can be met with a couple of different approaches, and they're both important. Locking up for extensive period, not permanent, but I mean a fixed period of time that we know they're going to serve for the violent criminals among us, to extract them so they can't continue to commit other crimes and our communities become safer, is a critical component of what we are going to be proposing in more detail in the weeks ahead. But another really important component of that is support for the ideas of, which is also, I think, universally becoming accepted, the need for mental health. Addressing mental health components of crime, nonviolent crime, especially drug crime, you name it. The need for drug addiction counseling, alcohol counseling, other types of, like I say, mental health issues that drive recidivism, for people breaking into cars and stealing purses out of there, or stealing, loose change, or breaking into an outbuilding on a farmstead and stealing some tools and selling those so that you can feed your drug habit. We all recognize and I'm supportive of those matters. I'm not just a knuckle dragging prosecutor. I've done this a long time and recognize there are categories of criminal defendants. The system can address both. Tim talks about the politics of all this. I don't care about the politics of it. We want to drive policy that makes communities safer. So we don't have to go on a pendulum back and forth. We can stop somewhere in the middle on that and say which categories of defendants belong in which camp. And we need more protection in our communities. And when you say that there's, the state usurping this, or that you haven't talked to any groups of sheriffs, start with your elected sheriff, Andy Schneider. Start there. And then talk to us in a week about what you've learned about the violent crime problem, and the problem with defendants fleeing from law enforcement, and the problems with unlawful use of firearms by violent criminals. Talk with Andy Schneider and the men and women who work for him in the sheriff's department, right there in your own county. Andy's a leader. Andy's a leader because he understands this problem. And he's one of the first people I spoke with a little over a year ago, talking about these exact issues. So I've spoken with people all across the state. The Attorney General of North Dakota is the law enforcement leader for the state. They're the top law enforcement officer. It is incumbent upon us to have be driving policy in a wise way that is reflective of the needs of our communities all across the state. They don't get their own criminal laws in Cass County or out in Golden Valley or up in Minot. They don't get their own set of criminal laws for the most serious offenses in our state. We have to help drive that policy, and I intend to do it wisely, with experience, with data, and doing it in a way that reflects the need to protect our communities from violent criminals and also do more on the recidivism side of things. If we're over incarcerating truly nonviolent offenders, what can we do to free up some of that prison space? Because I've got ideas for it. We're going to put violent criminals into it for certain amounts of times. They're going to be lengthy, and they're going to protect our communities.
Tim, I'll let you respond, and then we'll have Chad move us on to a new topic area.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just looking at the statistics again, and I'm not sure where Drew is coming from. I know Andy Schneider very well. I've talked to him before. I think he believes that the enforcement of law enforcement is local. To try to do it at the state level under the Attorney General just doesn't work. So I don't know what Drew is proposing, but he doesn't. He's not running a U.S. Attorney's office. He's running the Attorney General's office. If I'm elected, what I'll do is ensure that the local law enforcement agencies have the tools they need to enforce the laws. Now, I'm just looking down the statistics again, and rat-a-tat-tat, 15 murders, 24 kidnapping, 46 rapes, which is, if from 2017, is about average. Going down, aggravated assault, we have 638 this year. That's actually down from 575 in 2017. So simple assault, it's up a couple hundred, but on average over the last 5 years, it's about the same. One of the things that jumps out at me is this statistic on marijuana. I mean, we had 3,463 violations for marijuana in 2021. That's a lot of resources to commit, more so than all those other crimes that I just mentioned, to take away from law enforcement, the court system costs, the incarceration costs. I mean, the costs that we commit for enforcement of a marijuana charge is just staggering. And that's why I say we should legalize marijuana under this initiative measure.
Sure.
And really save a lot of law enforcement bucks.
Well, I want to get into that and have you both. Maybe that's what Chad's going to ask now.
Well, I was actually going to shift slightly to a different place, but I think that the discussion about safety in our communities is really important, one that clearly needs more resources towards it. We've got real problems in this state. This may sound a little off topic, but I'm going to get there, Drew. Stick with me, okay? Last week, there was a hearing on critical race theory, and Jim Casper testified about how we can enforce the ban on critical race theory. The superintendent's office said they don't have the resources to do it. He said he talked to you and that you said, quote, "I'd be happy to do it if you get me the resources." Do you really think the Attorney General's office has time, no matter what resources are given, to be curriculum police in the state of North Dakota with all the other things we just talked about? Did you agree to that? What are your thoughts on the AG's office and BCI being involved in studying every complaint parents have about CRT?
Yeah, I think I was glad that no one claimed that they were quoting me in that, because that wouldn't be an accurate quote. I'm probably the most accessible government official in North Dakota. And so I talk with any and all legislators and other leaders, people calling in. You talk about an ultimate issue. The matters of curriculum in education go to the communities and most important, parents and parents who speak through Tim can speak to this better than I, for sure, having been on the school board for all those years. And I thank him for that service, because I know that's significant government service. I mean, you're balancing a lot of needs there. So no, I don't. That's not a traditional enforcement type mechanism at all. It's not one that we're seeking, and nor will I be proposing that we have that along those lines. I have a little sister. I can still call her my little sister, even though we're both in our 50s. I'm super proud of Tanya. She's a public school teacher in Fargo for a lot of years. She's got 30 years this year in education. And then she became an assistant principal, and now principal in a couple of different schools, including a brand new school that they put her in because she's absolutely outstanding. And I'm just super proud of her. And one of my favorite things is when I'm around, people grab me and tell me about what an awesome principal my sister is, and before that a teacher. And I realized just the value that I knew this going through that same public school system over there that we get from our public school system. But one of the greatest things about it, whether you're in a public school setting in North Dakota or a private school setting in North Dakota, is that parents have such a critical role, and we get to have it. I don't know what's happening in other parts of the country, but I talk with people all across the state who are really pleased with the fact that their kid goes to Bismarck High, or their kid's in a middle school here in town, or whether it is across North Dakota, that they can be heard. So I think that's the most important thing. And as long as we don't lose that, issues come up from time to time, whether it's critical race theory or Common Core math, or whatever these things are come along. And usually there's a lot of politics involved in it, and people get kind of fired up. But also there's always a nub of concern. And my experience has been across the years is that school boards and individual schools are really good about listening to the concerns of families and concerned adults. And it's a good dialogue. So that's my background on that.
Thanks, Drew. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but since Representative Casper did quote you, or maybe not quote you directly in the hearing, I just wanted to follow up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
We'll let Tim. I know Tim, having served on a school board, probably has some thoughts about that. Let's let him weigh in as well.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Rob. Look, good question, Chad. And I've been in the school board here in Grand Forks for 15 years, and I understand how school boards work. We do listen to parents, and they do have a role, but at the end of the day, school policy is governed by the administration, and that's the way it works. Now, CRT and the allegation that it's being taught here in Grand Forks is kind of beyond the pale. I don't really understand it. Just to try to define CRT is I think an academic right there. CRT with the theory of our country is founded on some kind of white supremacy. I really doubt that is taught in classrooms, even in history. I mean, obviously, it's pretty simple to see that looking back in history, we didn't have a lot of blacks in government at the time, and we knew that there was slavery going on. But I don't think there was any effort of a white type of class. So that theory is right out, I think is interesting, but I think we need to look at more so the biases and the prejudices that we deal with from day to day and on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure it's systemic, but I think it is on a case-to-case basis. It's real. And we need to be careful about how we, number one, understand it and how we interpret it and how we apply it. But it is part of our Constitution. I mean, the 14th Amendment was enacted to give everybody equal rights. Now, look, that's basically, I think, if you teach the 14th Amendment and then you say, well, hey, that's CRT, that's not legal. at the state level, I mean, give me a break. That's government intrusion on basically our public education. And I really think it's way out of bounds.
I want to, thanks for that answer. I want to switch. Tim kind of already answered my next question. It's about marijuana, but I wanted to give Drew Wrigley a chance to answer this as well. We're going to have a ballot. We have a ballot measure. It's on the ballot in November that will legalize recreational marijuana. Obviously, a big part of that debate is about what the impact of legalization would have on the criminal justice system. Some say that it will help, that it will divert resources away from, putting nonviolent people in prison or in the criminal justice system for marijuana offenses. Others say legalizing a drug is going to make crime worse. So my question for you, Drew, is how do you feel about it? First of all, how are you going to vote on the ballot measure? Second of all, what's the impact going to be on crime and justice in North Dakota?
Well, I commented the other day, when you look at the number of marijuana violations that are in our statistic, and Tim seems troubled by our statistics. They come from, by the way, they're reported by the sheriff's departments, the police departments, and they come here so that we can put it together a compendium and make some conclusions out of them. It's not the state driving that, other than, we obviously, the state legislature is always and always will make the criminal laws of the state, but that's sort of beside the point on this. As a marijuana legalization, I go back to my dad on this. When I was growing up, it wasn't at the Wrigley house. It wasn't about whether marijuana was illegal or not, or how much trouble we'd be in if we had marijuana, or if we were using it. My dad, who was an engineer, and engineers can kind of be, pretty circumspect about their reasoning on things, and pretty direct. But my dad was about 40 years ahead of the curve on this, and we try to do it at our Wrigley house the same way. It's not about whether it's legal or not. It's about whether it's healthy, whether it's wise, whether it's good. My dad used to talk in terms, it'll still choke me up. I talk about it. I can still picture my dad talking to us about knowing the dreams that we all had, my sister and brother and me, and talking about he couldn't think of a bigger dream killer than becoming addicted to narcotics, and stuck with me over the years, that lesson, that it wasn't, he never once said, you'll be in so much trouble with me if you get arrested for having narcotics. Never. I don't remember him or my mom ever saying that. It was always a health lesson, and a mental health lesson, and about our dreams. And so I look at it from that standpoint. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote on the thing, but I'm also not going to be shy about my perspective. My perspective is that it is not healthy to use marijuana. It is not a dream enhancer to use marijuana. Whether it's legal or not legal will not change how I talk about that issue with Quinn, Patrick, and Harper, or anyone else that I can influence as I go along. I will say this: I think there are serious policy discussions that have to be had on if it's going to remain illegal, at what level would it be illegal? Is it so completely different from the utilization, the unlawful utilization of alcohol by underage people? Is it so different from that, or what kind of discussion we have? I'll tell you what, I love the work of all that. I don't have another phrase for it. Public lawyering. I loved being the United States Attorney and having that privilege of serving in that role, because in some part too, because this doesn't feel like partisan work to me. I'm a conservative person. Anyone who knows me understands that. But I also take seriously the role of evaluating all stakeholders at an issue and leading through the best public policy. This issue coming up is a matter the voters of this state are going to decide. And I get to vote like anyone else. And whatever they hand to us after this, if they legalize marijuana, we're going to have issues going forward that have to be addressed by our government. And I plan to be part of those solutions if elected Attorney General for a full term. And if it's made illegal, we still have those issues. Again, we should be concerned, I think, from the utilization of this narcotic, which I think most people agree, most mental health professionals agree, becomes a gateway potentially to other forms of narcotic use, and the abuse of that narcotic as well. Plus, I want to point out, I think there are a host of other reasons that would mitigate on the other side. We're going to hear them all. And I'm going to remain neutral, publicly declaring what I think people should do, or whether I support it or don't. It's not hard to glean probably how I'm personally going to vote. But I have tremendous respect for the wisdom of the people of North Dakota. They're going to reach a conclusion based on all of the information here. And I just hope that whatever we are handed after this election, if I'm the Attorney General or if Tim's the Attorney General, just to continue to work with people across the state to address the issues that are going to be inherent. I'll tell you, the Wrigley kids growing up where I started with this question, legalization of marijuana wouldn't have changed our perspective on marijuana and other narcotics because that issue wasn't brought to Blake, Tanya, and myself as a law and order issue in the Wrigley household. It was brought as a health issue, and that's what I think is the most important.
Tim, question to you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been kicking around this marijuana issue for the last, 50 years, 60 years, since the 1960s, 70 years, actually. Look, marijuana is not a gateway drug. We know that. It's been scientifically proven. To say that it's addicted to narcotics, I think is a stretch. Look, marijuana is basically used as like alcohol. People use it. I don't use it. I don't use alcohol. I quit drinking a couple of years ago. But look, marijuana for a lot of people, even my age, they use it for a stress reducer. They say it's better than alcohol. They just kind of need to have something to relax, and they smoke, marijuana. That's the way they conduct their lives. They are perfectly good people. In fact, they're some of the folks I know are prominent in the community. So look, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a problem for law enforcement. I don't use marijuana, but I think we dedicate a lot of resources for enforcement of an arcane law that prohibits marijuana in our state. And I think if we decriminalize it and legalize it, not only will it be good for our state and we can take some of those resources that we're using in law enforcement and the courts and the prisons and reshuffle or rededicate it to more serious crimes, which I agree with Chad. Safety in our communities was paramount. Putting resources at the community level, I think is critical. But for marijuana, I don't think so. We need to get over this. We're there's like 15 other states that have already legalized it. They haven't had issues. Canada is legal. We'd actually boost tourism, for example, if we had legalized marijuana, because Canadians would come down here and not have to worry about being prosecuted for imbibing in what is really a legitimate drug, probably safer than alcohol. So I just think, my position is that we should approve the initiative to legalize marijuana.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to move us to the emails that Mr. Lamb referenced in his opening statement. Hopefully everybody knows that Wayne Stenehjem and former Deputy Troy Seibel's emails were deleted shortly after Wayne passed away and after Troy left the office. It came out that Liz Brocker, Wayne's former executive assistant, was the one that ordered those. In her email, she said, we need to delete these in order to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests. Tim, I'm going to start with you. Do you think Liz Brocker committed a crime, and do you think that there should be charges brought forward? And then Drew, obviously you're living this, and what your thoughts are on how this goes.
Well, look, my position, and I think I've made this clear. I think I've got one line in the Tribune about it, but basically, because the Attorney General's office is involved in this situation, I would appoint a special prosecutor to take a look at it. And you really need to take no further than to look at the manual, the Opens Records Manual. It's published by the Office of the Attorney General. Maybe Drew's got that in his bottom drawer. I don't know. But look, there's quite a few opinions in here from Wayne. And, it opens up with why we have an open records requirement. And it's under our state constitution. It's under statutory law. And the Supreme Court has weighed in quite a number of times to say that open records is important. Why? Why is it important? People don't understand. Deletion of emails. Well, those are his emails. So, go ahead and delete them. And we can go ahead after we fired Troy, we can go ahead and delete all his emails. That Drew was his supervisor. He's got to take responsibility for his subordinates. And if somebody deleted Troy's emails, that falls under Troy's supervisor, and that would be the Attorney General. Look, the reason why we have open records is because the public has a right to know what's going on with our government. And it has said, the laws have said, even the Supreme Court has said, that where public money is being spent, the public has a right to know whether it's being properly spent and for any public irregularities in handling public matters. And if you take a look at this manual, at this open records manual, which is published by the Office of the Attorney General, it says right here that an email is defined as a record under the statute 44-04-17.1 subparagraph 16. It includes emails. It's a public record. Now, look, what's the penalty for this? Well, you have to look no further than page 19 of this, and you look at what the repercussions are. The Attorney General's office is the top enforcer of the laws of the state. Drew has already made a mention of that, and now you have to also be the top example as an office to enforce the laws. And under page 20, criminal violations, it says under legislation enacted in 2001, a public servant, this is a quote out of the manual, a public servant who knowingly violates the open records and meetings laws is guilty of a Class A misdemeanor.
Tim, I think can we?
So did Liz violate the law? I would appoint a special prosecutor to look into that.
Yeah, let's let Drew respond. Yeah.
Yeah, tough to figure out where to begin, but I'll start here. I stand by my statement. You won't find a more open and accessible, transparent public official in the state across my 20 years, whether, other stakeholders wanting to meet with me, interact, the media, getting access to anything and everything. Rob has had how many open records requests in the AG's office, in the governor's office when I was there. I have a complete commitment to we all do. In fact, I think Tim and I would agree, no one should even be allowed to run for Attorney General in this state under any party banner or independent banner if they're not committed completely to the idea of open records and meetings. Now, but the question of the illegality of these acts, there's nobody, I can guarantee you this, there's nobody more disappointed that those emails were deleted than I am. I mean, who could have been in a position to benefit more than from 20 years of emails of my predecessor, who is no longer, Wayne, one of the things Wayne said to me when I was running was, we were talking about a couple of different issues. And he said, well, Drew, if this works out for you, I'll only be a phone call away. Well, that's not the case. And for that and other reasons, those emails, no one was more concerned than I am. Those emails were deleted. in the hours after Wayne passed away, a week and a half or so before I was appointed Attorney General. The emails of at that time Deputy Attorney General were deleted at the instruction of somebody who did not run that matter past me as the Attorney General. But it's important to note a couple of things. This isn't Drew Wrigley, just Drew Wrigley saying there's nothing illegal. Our office has the foremost experts on open records and open meetings anywhere in the state. We have a professional staff that deals with these and has been there for many years working on these matters. And to a person, they evaluated the situation and saw that it was to them quite obvious that there had not been a violation of law. We went from there. I've evaluated all the statutes myself and gone through it. This isn't some private email account that Wayne had or that Troy had. His secretary was in the emails every single day, going through, culling through, seeing if there was something that she needed to print out or give to him. There was nothing private about the account. That's true of me. I'm notoriously lax about opening the emails because I just have my assistant go through there. I refuse to be the Attorney General for email or the U.S. Attorney for email before that or the Lieutenant Governor for email before that. Email is a tool. It becomes a burden. So I have just people go through there. Let me know what's there. I tell people all the time, you want me to read your email? Send me a text. Tell me there's something important in email and I'll read it. Wayne's email was open and evaluated on a daily basis by Liz. Also, I get 0 emails that are not CC'd to 5 or 6 other people. There are matters of knowledge all over the office. We've had 1 request for emails from Wayne's emails and Troy's emails that bore on an issue that people thought, ooh, that might be missing now. And they weren't missing at all. We had no difficulty constructing a response to those from around the office because they were CC'd to so many people. That's important also. What this arose out of, Tim, is that we discovered the day after the deputy left, the deputy at the time, we discovered a $2 million cost overrun from a year prior. What did I do with that information? Within 24 hours, I made it available to the auditor of North Dakota. I provided him all the emails. We started amassing all of the information because that's why we have open records. We have open records because we work for the public and they're entitled to see why are we doing or not doing whatever we're doing. So I put together absolutely every scrap of paper. Yes, it predated my time in the office, but I was responsible for getting that information together so there could be a public assessment of what had been done. And that $2 million cost overrun is a matter now of scrutiny by the legislature, as it should be. We've not only cooperated, we've put that matter into the public realm because that's our commitment. Not just sitting here in a technical matter, checking boxes. Oh, did you do this or didn't you making sure the public has information. We did that. They requested the emails and we had to let them know. And Rob was one of the people requesting the emails. We had to let them know we can't provide those. We've just now discovered they were deleted. We've moved heaven and earth to try to get those emails back. We've everything we can possibly do, consulting the experts, and they are truly gone. We've put in place policies so nothing like that can happen again. And I dare say that's impacting in a positive way everyone in that capital. But Tim, to suggest that the deletion of an email, there are felonies being committed then every day in that capital. There's no rule, regulation, anything that bars people from deleting emails. They go along, they work on them, they open them up, and you delete them. Nothing. And that's what we assess this under the records keeping policies of the Attorney General's office and the government of North Dakota. And was there anything done to get around an open records request or do something in the word I used at the time, nefarious? And there was not. And people don't have to take just Drew Wrigley's word for it. The foremost experts in the state, Jack McDonald, for instance, who works on behalf of how many news organizations in the state, who has drafted the open records laws in the state, who testifies every legislative session on these matters. What did he say from the very beginning? Troubling, shouldn't have happened, not illegal. What did the state's attorney finally, I think Rob was the reporter who contacted the state's attorney over here and said, tell us what you think. Was there anything illegal? No, nothing illegal that they could see that they evaluated as well. So Tim, to appoint a special prosecutor, this I will not do. I will not make a political show out of walking down ceremoniously with items here, special prosecutor, go through and make an evaluation so that I can get the burden of this off of my shoulders and it can be on someone else's. We made a determination based on the facts, based on expertise, and based on the law. It is clear to everybody who's looking at it objectively. It is troubling that this happened. We've got things in place. The people who did this, they did the wrong thing. It isn't going to happen again under my watch. And we've highlighted the issue around the state, and we're not going to make a political show out of it so that we can look like big shots, calling in a special prosecutor for something that's not a crime. That's not the way the system works. I'm accountable. I make decisions, and then I stand up and I answer the media's questions or the public's questions or whatever you want to have, an opponent's question, whatever it might be. I've always done that in my life and career, and I'll continue to do that up ahead. And I did that in this instance as well. Matters decided, and it's a matter of record. The right call was made by us in our office and by Jack McDonald and by the state's attorney and by everybody who looked at it. But we're going to make sure, and we are making sure, nothing like that is able to happen again.
We have about 10 minutes left. I just, since Drew referenced it, I did contact not just the Burleigh County State's Attorney, Julie Lawyer. I asked her if she was planning on doing any criminal charges related to the email. She told me no. Also talked to the North Dakota Highway Patrol, asked them if they were planning on doing any sort of an investigation. They also said no, for what that's worth.
Well, look, I mean, it's hardly that you can say within your own office that you're going to be exonerated by making some kind of declaration. There's nothing that came out in writing that I have seen, and to do anything like a self-evaluation of that particular violation, which is in your own manual, that it seems to me that the only way to make sure it's fair and transparent is to appoint a special prosecutor, and maybe perhaps from outside the state, because then you get an impartial view of what's going on here.
Let's give
that's my stance, and if elected, I would do that.
Let's give Drew a couple minutes.
It wasn't me who was being accused of anything. So I was making an assessment about the conduct of other people, and we made the right assessment, and it was backed up by the assessment of the foremost experts in the state and other people in law enforcement. Everybody agrees except for you, I guess. And at the end of the day, it's an important matter. And it doesn't just become an important matter if I, go through the expense, time, and inefficiency of getting someone from what do you think, Wyoming, come in and they'll evaluate it. They know more than Jack McDonald about our laws in the state. I mean, this has been evaluated completely. It's a very serious
not a prosecutor.
All right. Well,
everybody that you've talked to is biased in your court. So what we need to do is get somebody that's unbiased, take a look at this. And what's to say another agency that gets called under the carpet for some emails, they're all of a sudden deleted. And guess why? Well, the precedent set by the Attorney General's office.
Let's. I think we've all made our points about that issue. Let's move on. Drew, I want to talk a little bit about an aspect. You said that the Attorney General's job is much broader than the U.S. Attorney's job. Obviously, a lot with crime in the criminal justice system. But there's a lot of governing that takes place. For instance, the State Industrial Commission, which is a hugely important body in our state. One of the things that Tim said in the opening is that he felt that the regulation of the Industrial Commission at times for the oil industry was too lax. You haven't been in the office that long, but long enough certainly to attend some of those meetings. What's your approach to that aspect of your job? Do you feel like the job the Industrial Commission has been doing in the past with your predecessor, and obviously the governors on that commission, the ag commissioners on that commission, what do you think of the job they've been doing up to now?
Well, I think the most important thing they've been doing, and they don't have a choice, I like to think they would do it anyway, is that they've been transparent about what the work is of the Industrial Commission. Our meetings are streamed. People can tune in, or they can certainly come in, and people do come in and observe our meetings. The governor, myself, and the ag commissioner are not permitted to talk about the business of that committee outside of the meeting room, where it's governed by open meetings. And so we have to conduct all of that business in public. We have an excellent staff that goes through and does an enormous amount of work on these enforcement matters and issues that come up and come to the fore. And then they bring matters in for our evaluation on penalties or what have you, when it comes to whether there's a spill and sometimes there are just accidents, and those things happen and have to be assessed. And we have to be smart about our enforcement as well, and recognize that there are things that happen in industry. And start a fix me up project in your own garage. Things happen. And when they happen, there are degrees. Sometimes it's accidental and unavoidable. Sometimes there's a degree of negligence that's involved. Sometimes there's an intentional negligence that people are persisting in wrong conduct because they're trying to save a buck or move things along more rapidly. But we need to try to address that with the penalties that we have. I think maybe, and this is what Tim is getting at. Tim, I don't want to speak for you, so if this isn't it, you'll correct me. But one of the issues has been whether there's a penalty that gets affixed, and then there's incentives that the private entity or the people involved, the wrongdoers, that as they go through and incrementally clean up the spill or address the issue that is a matter of concern, that some or part of the penalty will be alleviated. That's been done, again, in a very open and transparent way by elected officials across all the decades. But I think it's come more to the point because of the energy boom here in the last years, and that that's been done in a transparent way as a way of incentivizing rapid and complete progress on addressing spills, as I said, or other issues that come into the purview of the Industrial Commission. And I agree with that policy. And it's not even completely different from what I was talking about before with my criminal justice reform. You have to, sometimes you're looking to have incentives just to, get somebody to get their drug treatment, their alcohol treatment, and then, stamp out recidivism. And other times you're punishing conduct and protecting community, and that takes an extraction of an individual. Same is true here, but it's done in a collaborative way and needs to be all in the full view of the public. And sometimes people will be critics of that because they'll say, well, I would have done that a little bit differently. And that's fair game. I mean, that's really why we have open meetings, isn't it? I mean, so that we can have our judgments informed by public feedback or sometimes blowback, legislators and others seeing the work that we're doing, the penalties that we're putting in place and how we're managing that process. And that's the greatness of the system. It's not just so people have great, something great to read in the paper that day. It's so that we have the incentive to work hard to get it right and then do course corrections where the broader public or the legislative leadership or others in the state think we need to do that. So I put it out there to answer your question. I mean, that's broadly, but I mean, I think they're doing a good job, and that's my commitment going forward. Conduct it just like I've always conducted my work. We're going to do it openly, as we have to do in those meetings. And then, where our judgment can be informed, if people think that we should be tightening the screws up a little more, or maybe loosening, whatever it might be, we listen to that. But we're accountable for those decisions. That's the way it should be. It's part of just yet another manifestation of the greatness of North Dakota's open government. It's not perfect, but boy, it self-corrects because people are not shy about feedback. I have found that in my time as Attorney General. I get plenty of feedback. A lot of people have my phone number. People go into Twitter. I get a lot of feedback on direct messages on Twitter. And I only chuckle about it because there's some that you'll dismiss because somebody's just, got a black heart or something. I don't know. But more often than not, people are, letting you know why they think you could have done better at something. And if you're smart, if you're wise, you have informed judgment from it.
Tim,
but I think it's been good, and I'm proud of the service on the Industrial Commission, and I look forward to, if given that opportunity by the voters, to continue to work hard in that capacity in the years ahead as well.
Tim, you're responsible. We're going to try to sneak in one last question at the end here.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the Industrial Commission is a key part of the Attorney General's duties, even though it's not listed under the statute of the Attorney General's duties, is very, very important. The Attorney General, the Governor, and the Agricultural Commissioner, they are members of the Industrial Commission. And look, there's a lot done on that commission. And the problem that I have been told that the feedback on the Industrial Commission is it's done in secret. There's not a lot of transparency that's being practiced there. And that's, if I'm elected as the Attorney General, I'll publish the minutes of those meetings after every meeting. And I'll welcome the press if it's appropriate. Obviously, there's some meetings that are executive, so that they would be closed. But look, there's a lot of issues, especially with these oil spills out there. There's penalties involved, and those penalties are not being enforced, and the enforcer is the Industrial Commission. And those dollars are secretively being given back to the oil companies and say, hey, well, clean up your own mess. No, that's not the way it should be done. There's a private, as the spill that just happened the other day, the thousands of gallons of oil spilled in the Missouri River. Look, that is just catastrophic, and not to make a big deal about that is, in my eyes, not transparent, and it undermines the North Dakota way. You know, I've been 20 years in the military. I've never seen this type of government only run by one party. We need to have some checks and balances. And as if I'm elected, I will provide a check and balance in the state of North Dakota in the government.
There are no dollars being paid back to anybody in secret, Tim. That is it's so baseless, it's slanderous. That's just a false statement. You either know that it's a false statement, or you are really listening to bad sources. This is all done in a transparent and open way. It doesn't mean that you won't take issue with one penalty, how it's handled or not. But boy, that is a sweeping, it is a false and slanderous statement against the work of a lot of professionals behind the elected officials and others. You tell Carleen Fine, who's worked for, I don't know, 50 years for the state of North Dakota, who heads up those efforts. Lynn Helms, who's worked for, I don't know how many years, always transparent. You don't have any evidence for that because it's not true. Nothing is done in secret. We don't meet in secret. You mentioned the notes, they're all available to everybody listening to this podcast. Can go out there and go to the website and review those materials any way they want. And then they can write me a letter and they can say, I didn't like what you said. And they do sometimes. And and there's interaction. That's why we have the open records. There's a way to do this, Tim, without just making stuff up as you go along. And I would encourage you to do that, because you're getting bad information. And I won't even take issue with you. Who's ever telling you that? They don't have any way to back that up because it's not true. And there's all sorts of evidence to the contrary that it's done.
Well, Drew, there is evidence that the penalties are not being paid. That's what I said, and I'll stick by it. And the penalties, they're unaccounted for, and that's been the issue. And it's not being accounted for, and it's not being published. I haven't seen it in the newspapers, and I haven't seen it even talked about. What is happening to those penalties? We've had serious oil spills, and there are penalties associated to that.
You give me any case that you're interested in, Tim, I'll get you a full, it's easy through public documents and that are already available. You give me any case, we can do it off the air, you do it on the air for that matter. I'll get you that as quickly, you'll be surprised how quickly I can get that for you. And you could too, if you went there and looked at it. If it's not in the newspaper, it's because nobody in the media who evaluated that matter thought there was something even newsworthy. It's not our job I don't write newspapers. We put out public documents. They're all available. And you give me a case, Tim, I'd be glad to get it for you right away. All with public documents, all readily available to everybody listening.
Gentlemen, we're over time. We were going to try to get to another question, but I didn't, unless you guys, I hate to put it on you, but we are over time and I feel bad that we've gone past the time allotted. So,
well, you had one more question. If you want to do one more,
Chad, let's
as long as it doesn't apply to whether I pass the bar exam or not on the first try. We're okay.
So,
Chad, go ahead.
Drew, like we mentioned at the beginning, the AG's office has been in the press a lot the last couple of weeks. One of the things had to do with the signatures for the term limits initiated measure. I will say that I'm opposed to the initiated measure, so I was not pleased. I'm not a lawyer, however. But one of the things you did was have a press conference afterwards and basically say there's a lot of fraud that took place here. So one question is, if there's been clear fraud, why has nobody been charged yet? Is that still a possibility? And then secondly, I had a poll shared with me that the term limits folks put out this morning, who asked a question about you abusing your power. And overwhelmingly, according to this poll, again, I haven't looked at the methodology. North Dakotans think you abused your power by having the BCI look at Charles Tuttle's house. So one, will there be any chance that there is people charged for fraud, which you mentioned last week? And what do you say to those folks who say you're abusing your power? That's a lot, I know.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I'm certainly not abusing my power. If people want to ask if there was fraud involved in this, all they have to do is look at the entirety of these proceedings. When they see that the other side in this matter, Tuttle included, they didn't even contest that there was fraud. Their whole argument was that there wasn't enough fraud for the Secretary of State to keep the petition off. What is proven, and I'll just thumbnail sketch on a couple. One named Chloe Lloyd as a circulator came in, and there are 11 different, I think it was 11, 10 or 11 different signatures of Chloe Lloyd. Clearly not the same person. Obviously, to everybody, investigators, the Secretary of State's office, everyone in my office, everybody involved, Judge Hill. There was a great hearing that we had where Judge Hill was able to ascertain all the credibility of the witnesses, all the evidence, and he concluded the Secretary of State absolutely had this authority. The fraud was proven and obvious and established by the evidence we have in this case. And why wouldn't it be? The other side didn't even contest that. That wasn't their argument for the Supreme Court. It was that the Secretary of State wasn't able to extrapolate from that, they said, and then exclude a bunch of other signatures that came in through this same notary public. Well, our argument was, if you've got a notary public who's certifying all these circulators from all these people, and you know that he's fraudulent, because you see that he accepted 11 different signatures from 11 different people, presumptively, that are claiming to be the same person, you know that he's fraudulent. And the Secretary of State concluded, and we supported him in this, that he wasn't in a position to accept signatures of the work of any of the other people that came through that same notary public. Makes sense, right? I mean, if you have a teenager and she or he comes home drunk 5 nights in a row, it probably isn't required that you see what happens in the next 2 nights of that week.
So, Drew, why nobody charged? Why nobody charged?
I'm glad you asked that, because it's not our office that will consider those charges. Our office was presented with this information. I directed the BCI to get involved. They went out and investigated, spoke to the circulators, spoke to the people who were involved at different levels. And some of them even acknowledged crimes. Some of them acknowledged that they were committing the crimes of paying bounties to get signatures. Some acknowledged that they were, in fact, not residents of North Dakota when they were accepting these signatures. Those are crimes. They're regulatory matters. And whether it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt as a criminal matter goes to the state's attorney, who is in the county where the alleged conduct took place. That was the next thing we did. After we were done with our investigation on a regulatory matter with a totally different standard of proof, totally different situation, then we pass it on, and I pass it on to the Ward County State's Attorney's Office. They are considering those matters right now. People should remember the names involved, and you just cited to a couple of them, and see what happens on up the road. But that's not under the guidance or that's not the decision making of my office for who gets charged with those matters. It's the individual counties, and in this case, it was Ward County. In another one of these petition matters that we investigated, we had kind of an unprecedented push on these this year, and I was glad to do it. On another matter, there have been some charges levied already, or will be in a couple of other matters on the 60% threshold matter. And sometimes you have a provable criminal offense, and sometimes you do not. But this wasn't arguable. That's where I took issue with the Supreme Court. We had a press conference after. Some people asked, well, do you really want to go out and have a press conference when it didn't go your way? Yeah. I'm not going to just have press conferences when we're standing there holding a championship belt. That's not being accountable. That's not being transparent. We went out and pointed out everything I just pointed out. We laid out all the signatures, by the way. We laid out all the signatures for the media to examine them for themselves and see, oh, Chloe Lloyd sure has a lot of different signatures. And they went through all the other things and see all the people from out of state that signed the petition, and all the people from out of state that were circulating petitions, then crossing out the out of state address and putting an in-state address. I mean, it's all there, completely transparent. This is not a question of whether there was very significant widespread fraud, but the Supreme Court concluded that nope, you can't then extrapolate from that and go wipe out the other signatures that the same person, certified. Okay, I think the statute made clear that you can do that, and maybe it will up ahead, because maybe the legislature will speak to this and say, wait a second. They show that fraud. That's why we have a constitutional officer. That's what Judge Hill said after the state district court when he heard the hearing. And then it went up there, and that's what he said. Now, someone said to me, well, it's not wise, really, is to say cross things about the Supreme Court. I've been in courtrooms since 1993. I don't have easy relationships with courts. They're co-equal branch. I don't work for the court. I don't work for courts. I work for federal courts, state courts, Supreme Court. We respect them. Someone asked me, is it a legitimate judgment? Yeah, it's a legitimate judgment with which I differ. a lot and significantly. And I put out the information that we relied on and remind people that even the other side didn't claim that there wasn't fraud. They made the argument that it wasn't enough. The Supreme Court of North Dakota agreed that they needed more fraud, apparently, to keep this from the voters. Now it goes to the voters, and you accept that. Just because I don't agree with the court, they're not infallible. They're not infallible. They're final, at least until the legislature speaks, if they do. But I respect them. People might say, oh, no, if you respected them, you'd just agree with them. No, I respect them. They've got a different job, and they reached a conclusion. And now the legislature may speak to that. But in the meantime, the voters are going to speak to the issue of term limits, an issue on which I'm Switzerland. I don't really care what the voters, they're fine either way, and we'll enforce those matters either way. The voters are going to get to decide now whether they, and if this had been shot down, they would have decided up ahead, because I think the polling on that is probably right. That these are popular matters. We'll see. The ultimate poll will be in the election, and our enforcement matter had nothing to do with the subject matter. I'm not going to tell anybody how I'm going to vote on that. But there you have it. Now, there was a polling. I did see the polling on Drew Wrigley. I think in the dictionary next to the phrase "push polling," they should put the question that was put out about Drew Wrigley. Well, based on that question, I would lock up Drew Wrigley myself.
I can read the question just since you mentioned it. The question that was put to the survey was: North Dakota Attorney General Drew Wrigley has spent thousands in taxpayer dollars investigating and threatening supporters of term limits. The investigation included a raid of a term limit supporter's home. Do you believe Wrigley has abused his power? That was the question that was asked that produced the poll result that we were just talking about. Drew gave a what you want to respond to that, Drew?
I hope that you'll call me on to do the show, whatever the outcome of this election, and when this matter makes its way through, and then that issue of whether Charles Tuttle's home was the word raid. I would be happy to show them the video. I think was on your pod. It was a very nice, cordial conversation.
I posted it. He live streamed it. So
yeah, the agent was right down the street. I wouldn't friendly person, and he was nice, and he went up there and cordially went through the search warrant that was granted by a judge based on a showing of probable cause that there was evidence of a crime to be found in that premises, and they went in and they seized documents, and I'm guessing the public will have its opportunity someday to see what those are.
Tim, we'll let you respond to that, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, well, thanks for your overtime here, I guess. And thank you, Rob, for having us, and Chad and Drew. It's a pleasure to discuss these matters with you. Interesting that we pretty much disagree on all the issues. So the public, the voters have a clear, they have a clear choice. And, I was not involved in this in this matter with the term limits. That was basically Drew's office. That case went before the Supreme Court, but I did notice the number of signatures that you're talking about. I think they had, 20,000 more than was necessary. And now how you go through 20,000 signatures and determine that they're fraud. I don't know, but I think that was one of the questions of the justices, or whether they should be, experts for signatures. I don't think that's the base. That's what the Supreme Court does, but they did look at the plethora of information, and they decided that there were enough signatures to get that measure on the ballot. Now, if we can meet again, I'd sure like to see some discussion on women's rights. I think that's an issue that obviously Cara Mund is running on. Her sole issue is whether women's right to choice should be taken away. And I really think we're remiss in not bringing that issue up. It is a key issue in voters' minds this year. It's a key issue across the nation. And Kansas sure brought it out front and center, is saying that 65% of Kansas, which is redder than North Dakota as far as being more conservative, And in my mind, anyway, they voted 65%
Yeah.
to support women's rights, and I think that's a key issue.
I
sure hope you bring this up, Rob.
Yeah, well, I would, but gosh, we are so far over time already. I think we covered a ton of hugely important issues. I agree with you, Tim. That is also another hugely important issues. I think there's others we didn't get to, but you guys have, both of you, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. You promised me an hour. You gave me like an hour and 20 minutes, so I appreciate that so much, but we got to draw it there. Both of you candidates, I'm glad you participated. Thank you so much.
It was a good discussion, and I want to I sincerely want to thank Tim too for stepping forward. As we both know, it's a decision. It's not that easy to step forward and run for office. Also, his service on the school board, which I imagine all those years he served, was hard to walk out of a grocery store or hardware store without somebody grabbing you to talk about the issues of the day. So I genuinely appreciate that service and commend him on stepping forward to run for Attorney General.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. I was also a hockey coach, so I heard.
Oh, there you go.
Every night, my kid's not playing enough, right?
Yeah. Well, boy, that's a whole other. We could do a whole podcast on that. We'll stop it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.